Ultramarines are the space marines who are under the command of Robert Guilliman, one of the 20 Primarchs created by Emperor of Mankind from his genes, to unify humanity by reclaiming all the lost worlds of mankind and welcoming them into his new Imperium. The Ultramarines are considered one of the strongest and most honored of all the Space Marine chapters in Imperium of Man, and were responsible for almost single-handedly holding the Imperium together after the Horus Heresy. The Ultramarines, originally known as the Warborn, were the 13th Legion of the original 20 Space Marine Legions. This Loyalist Legion was later reorganized and divided into chapters according to the Codex Astartes. Ultramarines Primarch is Robert Guilliman, whose leadership were instrumental in humanity's survival following the Horus Heresy. Because their Primarch wrote the text that defines a Space Marine chapter, the Ultramarines follow this codex strictly. The Legion was created towards the end of Unification Wars, developed from the gene seed that was noted to be absent of mutation and with a high adaptability. The original recruits were drawn from the sub-equatorial Maglev clans of Pantpokro, the Var families of Saragon and Clave, the Midafric Hype oligarchy, and the anthropophagic tribes of Caucasus Wastes. As varied in culture and origin as these groups were, they all had one factor in common: their violent and often bitter resistance to the later stages of unification. The Legion was created at such a late stage in the war that they have no recorded combat operations on Terra, instead being used for the first time for the liberation of the solar system. During the early Great Crusade, the Legion became known as Warborn, referring to their disparate Terran origins that were all forged through war. As we all know, Ultramarines Primarch is Robert Guilliman. Like the other Primarchs, Robert Guilliman was also taken as an infant by the powers of chaos and removed to a far-flung world in effort to prevent the coming age of the Imperium. The infant Guilliman capsule fell on McCraig, where it was discovered by a group of noblemen hunting in the forest. Inside the capsule, they found a child surrounded by a glowing aura. He was taken back to Nor, where one of the two councils who governed McCraig adopted the infant as his son and named him Robert. Robert was a prodigy, growing fast in both body and intellect. By age 10, he had mastered every subject the wisest men of McCrack could teach, and his insights into matter of history, philosophy and science often stunned his elders. However, his greatest talent were as military leader. These talents led his father to give him command of an expeditionary force to Illyrium, a mountainous region in the far north of McCrack, whose wild inhabitants had terrorized the civilized regions for years and successfully resisted every previous military campaign. Not only did Robert fight a brilliant campaign, but he also earned the respect of the wild men who never again threatened the more civilized part of McCrack. However, on his return to the capital, Robert found the city in chaos, as his father co-counsel Galhan had attempted a coup. Approaching the city, Robert and his soldiers saw the city in chaos, being sacked by mobs of Gallian men. While the consul house was under siege, Robert left his men to restore order to the city, while he rushed to the council house and lifted the siege, only to find his father close to death surrounded by his loyal bodyguards. He had been mortally wounded by an assassin in Gallen's employ, and with his dying breath told Robert who was responsible. Robert swiftly crushed the rebellion and, amid a wave of popular relief, assumed the title of sole counsel of McCrack. Later on, when Emperor heard stories of the extraordinary son of Consul Connor, he realized that he had found one of the lost Primarchs. Later on, Emperor reached McCrack. He found a world that was self-sufficient, prosperous with a strong and well-equipped military, and engaging in trade with nearby systems. Impressed, the Emperor assigned command of the Ultramarine Legion to Guilliman and reallocate the Legion forward base to McCrack. The Ultramarines continue the tradition begun by Guilliman of recruiting from the worlds of Ultramar. There is rarely a shortage of volunteers aspirants, since the Ultramarines are revered throughout the realm, and many families can boast of having sent several generations of their sons to serve the chapter. No recruitment rites and trials of the Ultramarines are specifically known. However, they are known to utilize two types of general trials known as exposure trials and challenge trial. In the exposure trial, the aspirant must simply go out in the wilderness and survive for a set period of time. While simple in nature, it is extremely difficult as the trial is often set on death worlds, desert worlds or ice worlds. Other times a feral world savage might be inserted into the middle of a hive city. The trial is often impossible to complete, with the subject succumbing, but being recovered and healed by apothecaries should be deemed worthy. The Ultramarines make extensive use of exposure trials. This form of trial seems to be culturally ingrained into Ultramar society, as the warrior elite is known to cast newborn infants into the wilderness in order to test their resilience. The other trial, the challenge trial, sees the aspirants engage in a duel with a full battle brother. None of the challengers are expected to defeat the brother. The trial is measured in degree of failure. Very occasionally an aspirant does manage to beat the battle brother, and when this happens, it is not uncommon for an individual to go on to become a legendary hero of the chapter. Aspirants who survive training at one of the BARC institutions in Ultramar human youths are induced into the chapter as scouts, as a codex decades before completing their transformer into full Space Marines. Those who fail their trials, however, can be turned into aspirant servitors, which are then used by the Ultramarines to later fatally test new groups of aspirants. Ultimately, Guilliman's rule over the Imperium would come to an end in the Battle of Thesala. There he faced his treacherous brother Fulgrim in the fateful duel. Guilliman was mortally wounded during the battle and put into stasis thereafter by the Ultramarines, where he would remain for the next 10,000 years.